Hey everybody, welcome to Nga yet again. Here I am, in my new location. So, as you can see, there is a nice, beautiful, delicious blank wall with some scratches on it, but don't pay attention to that because I'm here. So I will take any suggestions that you want for things to put on this wall, related decorations. I'll accept fan art. But yeah, so what I'm here for today is to talk about a little bit of history, because if you didn't notice, we have reached 500 subscribers, which is something I am extremely thankful for, something I never expected would actually happen. But we're going for it. We're going for 1,000, and we're going beyond. If you're part of the Nga crew, we're going places. But yeah, anyway, I'm just super thankful for that, and as a recognition for our quest to move forward, we must also look back. For this reason, I have done much development on Proto-Cern Kahelen. As you might recall from the prior live streams and etc., the Proto-Cern Kahelen, main progenitor language family to Arodjun, and then all the other languages that exist in that universe that I have not yet created. I made it backwards. Do not recommend that. Make your proto-language first next time around. Note to my future self and to all of you, make the proto-language first. But I managed to make a pretty good way of crafting it backwards, and I have had a little bit of time sitting in a house that I was house sitting, and I did a huge wave of development on it. I have been going through a lot of things recently, both, searching through physical items to throw away because I just moved to a different place, and through a lot of mental reflection, that kind of going through things. So, as a combination of both of those things, I have found several documents that are very special to me, and I'd like to briefly go through some of those before we proceed with things. So this is going to switch the video over to my phone, and I'm just going to show off some of the very early progenitors of what would eventually become Arodjun and everything that I'm doing right now. So here in front of me, I have several important documents that led up to where we are today. Going straight from some young notes that I wrote when I was a little lad straight up to the Arodjun book. And these are all things that I either have had deep in my storage and haven't looked at in a long time, or have just recently found while rummaging through things to keep and throw away, and I figured that they would be relatively important. Now, the first thing to note is that through all of these documents, I did not know a single thing about linguistics until just barely starting to get some stuff in the first Schwa book. All of this is stuff that I created merely out of an interest in the world building of Fwonk Casanosia, and it just kind of went from there. So we're going to start with this thing. It's just a cheap little index card holder, and it just says Casanosian written on it. What could possibly be in here? Well, inside, you will find a couple note cards, and these note cards contain the very first written information about Casanosian. Now, Casanosian is just an alphabet, essentially. I created this because I wanted the people in Fwonk to have a written language, but I didn't know anything about linguistics then, so I basically just transcribed the English alphabet into different symbols and then added a few more extra symbols gradually as time went on. And a lot of these symbols have changed, but it's overall still legible to me because I use this so much, and me and a couple of my friends use this to, communicate and write secret notes in the bathroom and stuff at school. Yeah, and so there's just a lot of names of places in Fwonk. There's Arodjun, Irkanania, Casanosia, Fwonk, Ruxalusha, Fogion, etc. And there's the double L making the y sound and all that because I only knew a little bit of Spanish and pretty much nothing else. It's just funny looking at this because I also thought that the only difference between one language and another, again based off of my assumptions about how similar Spanish is to English, I had the assumption that what made something a different language was just that things are spelled a little bit differently and then the different letters made different sounds. So I wrote this accents to speak Casanosia thing, and it shows just different sounds that the different letters can make, apparently. You write the English word, but then you pronounce it these ways, and then that somehow turns it into the Casanosian language in heavy quotation marks. Like, I was like, oh yeah, can mean ow, oo, and a, or whatever double E is supposed to mean. Then we have the B symbol meaning B or V, which, you know, that's slightly insightful into some kind of logic about the world. There's the letter C, which could make S or K, kind of like how English, the letter C can mean S or K. Again, like, whoop-de-doo. D or DH. I don't know when DH ever happens, either in any of these languages that I've made or in English. Yeah, so there's just a lot of these things going on. Just lots of weird, like, these letters can mean this or this or this. Like, Z can mean Z or Sha. Then TH can mean TH or Z. And then we have a couple little bit of like phonological rules, again like in quotation marks. We have BI, it says B is pronounced as V when before I. So, you know, that's a start. That's 10-year-old me getting some kind of connection to how phonology works. We have A and Y. Y is used as A when after a consonant. I spelled consonant wrong also, but I don't know what that means. Yeah, and then we just have like basic number and math symbols, and that number system is still the number system used today, if you saw from my excerpts from the book. Then we have this thing right here. This is Fwonk Casanosia maps and their relationship to the advancement of the contained information in relation to the Yard model. EFC Yard model 2007 to 2014. Yeah, so this is a book that literally just contains just maps, the history of the physical Yard model, because like I said, you know, it was a yard thing. Like, we'd just like put a hose out in the yard and then we'd fill it up with water, create the lakes, and make the buildings out of dog bowl casts and stuff. And so whenever the Fwonk Yard model got destroyed, I wrote down like the stages of its development over the years, you know, 2007, 2008, and to 2009, how it grew, then 2013, and then 2014, whenever it got destroyed. There's the palm tree and everything else that was left. And then here, this is the original. This is where everything came from. The Pup Heroes. This is a story that I wrote with my friend Santi when we were like 6 and a half or 7 years old. This is the story of several pups who appear from canisters, and they each have a certain elemental power, and they're out to they join together and they save the world from some kind of dark force using a series of magical items. If that sounds a little bit familiar to you, that's because it is literally Bionicle. I don't know if you've watched my streams recently, but, you know, I had quite the affinity to Bionicle when I was young, and I still have many Bionicles. But this was at the peak of my influence from Bionicle, and same thing with my friend Santi, and we just created this story entirely out of our dogs, essentially, anthropomorphic versions of our dogs: Frankie, Cracker, Roxy, Louie, Sparky, Max, Caesar, etc. You know, all being like these super powerful beings. This was during the era of the Toamari, like the underwater ones, so they're all like swimming around, like they can breathe underwater, and they have like a little underwater landmass that's also connected to the ground via like one tiny little isthmus column. You know, it's pretty much a ripoff of Bionicle. And I realized that pretty quickly after, or at least by the time I made 3 entire Pup Heroes books, all of which are like 40 pages long, not very well written at all, with lots of illustrations, but of the dog people being of about that quality. So it's, you know, it's not something I like to look back on a ton, but it literally just began as Bionicle. And then here's like a really old map of like of the area that I made. And so this is before I even called Arodjun. It was still just Prince Village, because that's where the Prince Eye took over. Also, Prince is the name of a Chihuahua that we know. But yeah, so this book is just full of various maps of just like all the geographic regions, all the street names in Rook City, like pictures of pups just hanging out during like ick evacuations, watching TV. You got maps of Europe whenever they were just discovering Europe. Then we have like a map of like an empty school during the ick evacuation, and it's, you know, just like the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence for Fwonk just sitting up there. Yeah, so this is just really cool. You know, this is just like my main source of records. You know, there's like a demographics chart. There's Queen Roxy, of course, named after my dog. And then there's stuff that happened briefly after the yard model was destroyed. Karamat. Yeah, so there's just like a ton of maps and images, and this is like a voting ballot that I made in like 2011 for the... No, this is the 2012 to 2013 Kharkiv election for Fwonk. Yeah, so, you know, this is a big book. It includes a lot of insight into where the names of these things came from, and just a ton of history in general. So the next thing that I did, as the yard model was getting old and I had already created the written language, like the alphabet, I didn't have an actual language, and I just found these a couple days ago. These are pages from the original grammar of what I called the ancient Pakoyan language, because even back then I 100% knew that I didn't know linguistics. I wanted to create a language super badly. I didn't know that conlanging was a thing. I had no idea that that existed. I didn't know that was a word. All I knew was that, you know, there were languages that people created in like Watership Down and in Bionicle and stuff like that. And so I was like, you know what, I want to do that. I have all this culture set up, why not? So I made an attempt to make this language, but I gradually realized that it was basically Spanish, because again, I was in Spanish class at that point. Only other language I knew was Spanish. So I created this language, wanting it to be different than English, but I ended up just creating Spanish with different sounds. Yeah, so there's adjectives, conjunctions, the pronouns, see, ancient Pakoyan languages, and so that you can see the beginning of the origins of Arodjun in here. You can see like verbs, see they have this DHM ending and it's pronounced Ba-dem right there with the Casanosian writing on the side and all that. So that was one of the main things that I kept from the original version. There aren't many other things other than that DM ending that translates between this ancient Pakoyan grammar and and Arodjun. Like we have the ud ol askif lek kesamid. I don't know what that means. I think it means I want to kill you or something like that. I don't know. But, yeah, so there's just all these basic grammatical rules and stuff. And so I was getting closer to knowing about linguistics, but I still wasn't there yet. I still hadn't gotten to that point. It was still all just assumptions that, again, based on my prior experiences, led me to just make it Spanish. Because you'll see, look, there's all like the verb conjugations and things there's like tense endings, and then there's the vowel that comes before it determines what person it is, etc. But yeah, so I'm pretty sure Kezem in Arodjun means to hunt now. So that's kind of a translation into the future. Now, I have been suggested that I make this an actual language, and I think I will. Now that I've created Proto-Cern Kahelen, as you'll see, I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to make Ancient Pakoyan with a lot of this vocabulary as a starting point, but of course, you know, done differently, done well, now that I actually know how to do stuff. I think that would be pretty cool. So yeah, more verbs, etc. And then we just have like interjections and question words, math. None of these numbers have anything to do with the numbers in Arodjun. Like that, these are just a completely arbitrary generation here. After this point, I was like, okay, I need to start retconning some of the history of Fwonk so that it can fit into a more mature context. So I made this, the Fwonk History, EFC History, Vol 1. Yeah, so I started writing like just a full history book for all Fwonk Casanosia. And the whole thing isn't written in Fwonk or in Casanosian. I have like the main chapter parts written in it, and it just is like a history of all the regions and things. And this became the basis for a lot of the stuff that ended up inside of the actual Arodjun book. So we have like, you know, this nicely drawn little penciled in map here showing 4,000 years before the remodernization, just the physical locations and stuff. You know, and then I just wrote a long history that goes and explains the backstory. It explains how the pup heroes from that original book back there kind of fit into the lore. They end up being like the 6 most famed war heroes from the First War of the Peninsula, which happens in the 750s BR, which you can also see in the book. A lot of content in here, and I had to look through this pretty extensively in order to translate it in to the Arodjun book for my honors thesis. Yeah, so is this it right here where they talk about the pup heroes? Where is it? Yeah, in these 6 separate pieces of the army, 5 warriors took charge of them. Korun, Savili, Sari, Kenny, Jeshin, and Akuvrin. These warriors eventually found each other fighting many battles, some successful, others not, blah, blah, blah. So that's like the technical origin, like the real origin, not the Bionicle ripoff, but the real origin of them. And there are supernatural elements in this world, but they're very difficult to come across, and they are most likely coming as a result of ancient human technology. So then we have Myaarwaakatau. This I did my senior year of high school. And then we have the very cringy, but definitely more linguistic Myaarwaakatau version 1. This is the very beginning of what would eventually become Arodjun. Just look at that absolutely cancerous, disgusting looking orthography right there. Isn't that something? Payeme yonwu mutao oshe Arizonas la huejojnyoshla oko on pumpun klishlichao yamya nyoshla ka. That is, what was it? Yesterday I went to the house in Arizona happily because usually there are cookies there. Yeah, so that it works. It works, and I spent a lot of effort making it work. Gender cases. Yeah, I was still learning at this point, and then we have like the alphabet and things that correspond to it, though I created a bunch of different symbols to try and match up with it, though I found a better way to do that more recently. And then I also tried creating the Fwonk one, but that didn't end up working out, though the pieces do look pretty cool. It's just that the words were so stupidly long that it was just useless. Yeah, so I spent a lot of time on this. This was just like a high school project, but it would eventually turn into to Arodjun, the big boy book that we have today. All those things led into the creation of this beautiful thing, and it's already outdated. Like, I'm gonna have to make a volume 2 of it that, you know, rewrites this as Arodjun, and like even the name of it's technically changed. And I've shown you guys a tour of it before, kind of might give a bit more context of all the geography, and then we have the whole history section and everything. The history section that mostly came from that blue notebook, and just all the massive amounts of effort that I put into this thing. Yeah, so that's where we are today. We're beyond this. We have moved on into this next era of Arodjun and Proto-Cern Kahelen, and we're gonna become a filler. We're gonna fill up all the languages and cultures of this world, at least as best as I can. I'm not gonna fully develop all of them, but that's just where it's been. It's been what, like a 13 or 14 year journey, getting from just like Bionicle fan fiction with dogs to what we have today. So I just wanted to thank you for that. Not only that, but there's also like a ton of comic strips and stuff that I wrote taking place in the Fwonk universe. But we're not even going to get into that now. That's a thing for later. And yes, that is foreshadowing, because I do plan on doing something pretty cool about that sometime relatively soon. You'll see. Yeah. And we're back. And now for the final piece de resistance, we're just going to go and take a look at what I've got on with Proto-Cern Kahelen now. So you take a look, and now I've created a word list, just like I have with the new Arodjun 9.0 documentation. So that's pretty cool. I've created all that, and it's a nice list of literally like 6,000 roots that I could choose from. Not only that, but I also have Arodjun approximates. Now, you remember me doing like the phonological transitions that I did. Like, I did like all the stages of the language developing backwards. That's a very good thing to have, and this definitely does not account for all of that. But I've created a lot of new roots since then, and I also wanted to just have all these roots here to see, like, if a person, like a linguist in Fwonk Casanosia, wanted to, trace back, like, their own reconstruction of the language, what would it look like to them? And so basically I just, like, skipped a lot of the middle steps, and I just did a straight up phonological transcription from one root to the next, and then I got all the things that are on here. So it's just like it's just a nice big list of, like, here's the root in modern Arodjun, and then here's the root if you change all the consonants but not the vowels, and here's all the roots if you also change the vowels. But it's literally just like first step to last step kind of transition. So it's not super accurate, but I use it as a starting point. So I'm like, okay, I know that word in Arodjun, but it doesn't have a root created yet in Proto-Cern Kahelen. So I look at, this, and then I go and I find something slightly different from that in a way that phonologically makes sense, and then I say, like, okay, yeah, that was the word for that back then. There are a lot of changes that happen. You can't account for every single variable, but in general it works out. First, next time around. So that's what I did there. And then we get to the big boy, the thing that I spent a whole day in a house-sitting house working on. The tables. We have all the consonants and all the vowels, the syllable structure, how it works. And then I had a certain set of expectations for myself on what to do with this, and one of them was many declensions for nouns. So I created 7 noun declension classes that go along with each of the 6 cases. So 6 cases, 7 declensions, and then we have singular, pockle, plural, and collective. So that's a lot of different combinations of things to have. And they all generally follow the same shape, but they've all got differences to them that are all very, very fun, and I'm excited about that because now, declensions are within my grasp. I'm going to clench those declensions, if you know what I mean. And I'm having a really good time with it so far. Other requirements I had for myself, I wanted an ergativity split, but I have it so it's mostly nominative accusative, except it switches to ergative absolutive whenever there's like a dative involved, dative or a locative or an instrumental involved. Then you'll have it switch positions to an absolutive and ergative alignment. Then we also have these 4 levels of evidentiality that get attached to the end of every sentence, and it also is conjugated for whether it's nomic, aorist, habitual, or indicative. Most of the time it's going to be indicative or aorist, but it's really cool having these nomic and habitual ones in existence, because that also kind of bleeds into a little bit of what happened in Arodjun. Then tense marking gets put as a prefix on the verb, but it's a verb prefix because whether it's active, passive, or middle voice also is a prefix. So those prefixes will go before these prefixes. Over here we have a large set of pronouns, all the various conjugations, and now another outstanding feature of Proto-Cern Kahelen so far is that in Proto-Cern Kahelen, there's not necessarily a specific second and third person. We have the genders are classified into child and adult, and then we have 3 levels of proximity, where we have the nearest adult, a far or middle ground adult, the obviate adult, and then the far obviate adult. And they all have a slightly different separate pronoun for each one of these. And the same goes for the children. And then if you're talking directly to someone, then you're going to call them by the near one. You're going to call them a near child or a near adult. But this could completely change if you're telling a story. It can make any story that you're telling sound like it's in the second person, but it's not going to be perceived that way. It's going to be perceived in a way that someone is the subject of a story, or someone is like the main recipient of the subject of the story. etc. So we have all these different classes. We have 0th person, which is whether God or a natural force, which can still be singular, pockle, plural, or collective, but it's going to be collective most of the time. And then we go down from all the different types of adults and children to a general human, to mammals, birds and reptiles, the higher animate things, and then plants, insects, and arachnids, and then down to inanimate objects. And then we have this for all the 6 cases, you know, all the various things going on with them. A lot of them are irregular. It's pretty fun. And then we also have strong verbs and weak verbs, and I'm very happy about this. I barely understood the concept of strong and weak verbs until I took an old English class a couple semesters ago in college. And I knew that it couldn't work in Arodjun, but it's going to work in here, and it works out really well. You're not conjugating them for tense and number, you're conjugating them for their animacy and their number. The tense, again, that just becomes like a little prefix on the beginning of the verb. So here you have all these varieties, and the strong verb just has a ton of corruption going to it. A lot of times the vowels are rounded out. A lot of times fricatives are turned into plosives, or the other way around. A lot of things are looped around. Syllables, final syllables are cut out, or final verbs are cut out to be replaced with something else. And then you have the classic, just the weak verb conjugations, which is going to be the majority of them. And this is just the classic set of verb conjugations. And yeah, and then what else do we have? Yes, the infinitive is nga. Yes, indeed. Whenever I saw that it was happening at the end of a bunch of words in that phonology work, I just knew, that's got to be, the verb, the infinitive. So, now there is a purpose, a specific definition for me being nga, other than it just being a funny sound. So, nga, that is the Proto-Cern Kahelen, the proto-language of the entire world I've spent my entire childhood developing. That is their infinitive verb ending. And then we have their gerund endings, their perfect form endings, and their modal form endings. And I just think that that's really, really cool. And because of that, I came up with a few sentences. That's right. The first, truly, actually crafted Proto-Cern Kahelen sentences. And I'm going to use this paragraph here as the basis for translating the first sentences for all the descendant languages from Proto-Cern Kahelen. I could easily make it in Arodjun in a second, but it's going to take more time whenever I'm literally creating these languages out of the remains of Proto-Cern Kahelen. So here it is. Oh god. It's a tough language to speak. There was a city deep in the mountains. Many people lived upon its soil. Some people believed that the gods were approaching. A mighty storm came. Many adults and children died. Those who escaped became the beginning of the world in which we live. Schwa dolefta. Myskvulath miftvest felef myrta. Myskvula laftinga ta lelingath fuhirm. Thval odol lelnate. Zoithlolth ulhukuglefte. Zolol ktotfes kuln rodir pustul fuhirm. I think that's really cool. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. I think it's really cool. Really difficult to say. A very rough feeling language, but I like it that way, and its complexities leave me a lot of room to simplify and further complexify in other different directions. So that's where we are now. I'm working on it, and we're going to start working on the descendant languages, and I am excited about working on the descendant languages. I've been waiting a long time to have enough of these tables crafted to be able to do that. And I'm not going to work too much more on Proto-Cern Kahelen, because again, it's the parent language. I'm going to work on making more specificities in other ones, like Paramachican and Ancient Pukoyan, and etc. So, this is pretty good. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you cringe. That's pretty much it for now. I'm glad that you guys embarked on this journey with me, going from the very beginnings of my linguistic experience all the way up to where we are today. Thank you for helping me reach 500 subscribers. I have some big juicy projects coming up soon, and I'm excited for those to be done so I can like release them, because I really want you guys to see some of the things that I've been working on lately. This is just one of them. This is barely one of the ones I'm talking about. No, it's not even one of the ones that I'm talking about, but I did it, and here it is. So, maniacal laughter. Alright, yeah, that's about it for now. For now, that is me, out. See you guys later. Let's get to 1,000 subscribers. So if you made it to the end of this video and you are not yet subscribed, like 68% of my viewers are according to my analytics, it's a little weird. We should subscribe to fix that. Wink, 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 wink. A very large smile. All right, see you guys later. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Mwah, out. Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da, ba-da-da-ba-da.